He said his love was just his way of teaching, but nobody beats someone they truly love until they bleed. When he started looking differently at my little sister, I understood the time had come to take justice into my own hands, even if it meant facing the devil head-on. My name is Judy Flowers Carter. I'm 78 years old and live here in Flagstaff, Arizona, where the winter winds cut through to your soul during the harshest months. Folks around here know me as Granny Judy the herbalist, because since I was a young girl, I learned from my grandmother the healing power of desert plants. These wrinkled hands, you see, have helped bring over 100 children into the world and prepared remedies that saved countless others. But not all pain can be cured with chamomile tea or sage leaves. Some marks stay with us for life, like tattoos etched with a rusty nail. Before continuing my story, I'd like to ask a small favor. If you're enjoying this old woman's tale, please hit the like button below and subscribe to my granddaughter Rose's channel, Grandparents' Tales, who's helping me share these stories. Each subscription feels like a warm hug reaching me. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. This internet thing is like magic that lets me into homes all across America, and that warms my old heart during this harsh winter. Our story begins back in 1962, when I was just 15 years old and my little sister Celeste only 7. At that time, we were living in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Phoenix. Our father Arthur had died 2 years earlier in an accident at the shoe factory where he worked. A machine that was supposed to press leather ended up crushing him too. He didn't even make it to the hospital. Our mother, Clara, was a strong woman, the kind that doesn't bend even in the strongest wind. But she wasn't made of steel either. She worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy family downtown, leaving before sunrise and returning when the stars were already hanging in the sky. Life isn't easy for a widow with 2 daughters to raise. Our little house was small but tidy. 2 bedrooms, a living room that also served as a kitchen, and a bathroom out back. What we lacked in luxury, we made up for in cleanliness. Mom always said, "Poverty is no excuse for slovenliness. A clean house is self-respect." And from an early age, I learned to help. While Mom worked, I took care of Celeste, cleaned the house, washed clothes in the cement tub in the yard, and still managed my schoolwork. Celeste was a beautiful little girl, you know? She had green eyes that looked like 2 bright emeralds, straight, long hair that I braided every day before she went to school. She was a joyful child, the kind who sees beauty even in puddles after the rain. She sang all the time, made up stories about the clouds, and named the ants in our yard. Seeing her happiness gave me strength to face the difficult days. It was on a Friday afternoon, returning from the store with a little flour and beans, that I saw a man sitting in our living room having coffee with Mom. Even from a distance, I felt a tightness in my chest. There was something about him that bothered me, without knowing exactly what it was. Maybe it was the way he looked around, as if calculating the value of everything. Or maybe it was his smile, a smile that never reached his eyes. "Judy, this is Mr. Albert," Mom introduced him, with a sparkle in her eyes I hadn't seen since Dad was alive. "He works as a truck driver and rented the back room from Mrs. Nelson." Albert stood up and extended his hand to me. He was a tall, strong man with calloused hands and nails dirty with grease. He must have been about 40, dark hair already thinning, a thick mustache that hid his upper lip. "Pleasure to meet the young lady," he said, looking me up and down in a way that made me want to cover myself more. "Pleasure's mine," I replied out of politeness, but feeling no truth in those words. "Albert has been walking me home from the bus stop these past few weeks," Mom explained, pouring more coffee for him. "There are too many troublemakers out there after dark." At that moment, Celeste came running into the living room, returning from the neighbor's house where she'd gone to play. She stopped at the door when she saw the stranger and hid behind my legs. "And this little princess must be Celeste," Albert said, opening that smile that bothered me so much. "Your mother talks about you a lot." Celeste didn't answer, just clutched my skirt tighter between her little fingers. She'd always been shy around strangers. "Don't be rude, sweetheart," Mom gently scolded. "Say good afternoon to Mr. Albert." "Good afternoon," she mumbled, without coming out from behind me. After that day, Albert started appearing more and more at our house. He brought small gifts for Mom, a jar of honey, a cheap scarf, flowers picked along the way. Soon, The two were dating. "He's a good man, Judy," Mom told me one night as we washed the dinner dishes. "Works hard, respects us. After your father passed, I never thought I'd find someone like him." I wanted to share in her happiness, but something inside me kept setting off an alarm whenever Albert was around. It was like that instinct that makes a hen gather her chicks under her wings when a hawk flies overhead. "Are you sure you know him well enough?" I asked, trying to sound concerned, not critical. "Oh, girl, you've always been too suspicious. Just like your father," she sighed. "Albert has already proven he's a decent man. He's even helping with the house bills." 3 months after that first visit, Albert moved into our house. Mom was radiant, as if she'd won the lottery. I tried to convince myself I was wrong about him, that it was just the jealousy of a daughter who didn't want to share her mother with anyone. In the early days, everything seemed fine. Albert would leave early on his truck trips, sometimes staying away for days, transporting cargo to Denver or Salt Lake City. When he returned, he'd bring a little something, a colorful ribbon for Celeste, a chocolate bar for me. He helped with the household expenses, fixed the leaking roof, reinforced the yard fence. I even started to think that maybe my fears were foolish. But soon things began to change, like those dark clouds slowly gathering on the horizon before a storm. The first time I saw his true side was when he arrived from a trip late at night. He smelled of whiskey, his walk unsteady. Mom was already asleep, exhausted after a full day scrubbing floors at her employer's house. "Where's my dinner, girl?" he asked, throwing his backpack on the kitchen floor. "It's past 11, Mr. Albert," I answered, trying to be respectful. "We saved your food in the refrigerator. You just need to heat it up." He slammed his hand on the table, making the ashtray jump. "I didn't ask what time it is. I asked where's my dinner. A man who works all day deserves hot food on the table, not leftovers saved as if he were a dog." The noise woke Celeste, who appeared at the kitchen door rubbing her sleepy eyes. "What's wrong, Judy?" she asked, her voice scared. "Nothing, honey. Go back to bed and I'll come tuck you in," I said quickly, wanting to get her out of there. Albert looked at my sister in a way that froze my spine. It wasn't the look of a stepfather to a stepdaughter. It was something different, something that made my stomach turn. "The princess woke up," he said, suddenly softening his voice. "Come here. Come give your stepdad a hug. He brought a present for you." Celeste hesitated, looking at me as if asking permission. Before I could say anything, Mom appeared, also awakened by the shouting. "What's going on here?" she asked, tying her robe. "Nothing, Clara." Albert completely changed his tone, like turning a page. "I just missed my family. Sorry if I made noise." I saw in my mother's eyes that she believed him. I wanted to scream that it was a lie, that he had just yelled at me, that he had looked at Celeste in a way he shouldn't have. But the words got stuck in my throat. Mom seemed so happy with him, so much less tired since he had arrived. What I didn't know that night was that this was just the beginning. That this man my mother had brought into our home would turn into the worst nightmare a family could face. That his arrival would mark not only the end of our peace, but the beginning of a time of darkness that would demand more strength and courage than I thought I had. In the weeks that followed, Albert showed more and more of his true face, but only when he was alone with us. In front of Mom, he was always the attentive man, the dedicated partner. As soon as she turned her back to go to work, the mask would fall. It started with small humiliations. He complained about the food I made, said the house wasn't clean enough, that I wasn't taking proper care of Celeste. Then came the absurd orders. He wanted me to wake up at 5 in the morning to prepare his coffee, even when he didn't need to leave early. He demanded that his clothes be ironed in a specific way, that dinner be ready exactly when he wanted it. "In this house, I'm in charge now," he'd say, pounding his chest. "A man is the head of the household, and a woman needs to know her place." And with each passing day, I noticed how his gaze towards Celeste was changing, how he created excuses to be near her, to touch her, how he insisted on bathing her, saying it was a father's responsibility. Every time he approached her, I felt my blood boil, but I also felt fear. Fear of what he might do to me if I confronted him directly. And worse, fear of what he might do to Celeste if I wasn't around to protect her. It was on a Thursday, 3 months after he moved in, that the storm finally broke with full force. Mom had gone to work as usual. I was finishing washing clothes in the tub in the yard, and Celeste was playing with her rag dolls in the bedroom. I heard a noise and rushed inside. What I saw that day was burned into my memory like a hot iron brand. Albert was in Celeste's room, leaning over her, his huge hand covering her little mouth, the other hand. My God, I can't even repeat what I saw. My little sister crying silently, her eyes wide with terror. I didn't think twice. I grabbed the first object I saw, a ceramic jar that was in the hallway, and hit him with all my strength on his back. "Get away from her!" I shouted, with a voice that didn't even sound like mine. He turned, surprised by the attack, then furious like a bull seeing a red cloth. "What do you think you're doing, you crazy girl?" he growled, advancing toward me. I pulled Celeste behind me, protecting her with my body. "If you touch her again, I'll kill you in your sleep," I threatened, feeling every word as absolute truth. He laughed that disgusting way. "And who's going to believe you? Your mother thinks I'm the best thing that ever happened to you all. It'll be your word against mine, and guess who she'll believe?" At that moment, I saw that he was right. Mom was so enchanted with him, so desperate not to be alone anymore, that she might not believe me. Or worse, she might believe but be too afraid to be alone again. "Next time you interfere with my way of educating, you'll get it too," he threatened, adjusting his clothes. "Now hurry up and finish that laundry and prepare my lunch. I'm going into town and I'll be back hungry." When he left, Celeste collapsed in my arms, sobbing so hard I thought she would choke. "He hurt you, Judy," she cried. "He said he would hurt you and Mommy if I told." I hugged her with all my strength, feeling my heart break into 1,000 pieces. "Since when, my love?" I asked, fearing the answer. "Since when has he been doing this to you?" "A long time," she whispered, her voice as small as she was. "Always when you go to get water, or when you're washing clothes outside." The hatred I felt at that moment was greater than anything I had ever experienced in my life. A hatred that burned inside, that made me want to grab the sharpest knife in the kitchen and wait for him to return. But I couldn't afford the luxury of blind rage. I had to be smart. I had to protect my little sister. And at that moment, I swore to myself that that monster would pay for what he had done, even if it was the last thing I did in my life. From that day on, I never left Celeste alone. I took her with me everywhere, even to the bathroom. We slept together, in each other's arms, me always watching the door. Albert realized what I was doing and became more irritated, more aggressive each day. The humiliations turned into pushes. The pushes turned into slaps. The slaps turned into punches. But always in places that clothing covered, never on the face where Mom could see. He knew exactly what he was doing. It was calculated. It was cold. A predator who carefully chose his moments, his victims, his territory. And now, that territory was our home, the place that should have been our refuge. Mom began to notice the change in Celeste. How she had stopped singing, how she was startled by any noise, how she cried at night hugging her rag doll. "What's wrong with that girl, Judy?" she would ask, concerned. "It's like she's seen a ghost," and she had indeed. The worst ghost possible, a flesh and blood monster who used my mother's trust and love as the perfect disguise for his evil. I knew I needed to tell her, but I was afraid of his reaction. Albert had made it very clear several times what would happen if I made up lies about him. "Your mother and your sister will pay the price," he threatened on days when he came back drunk from his trips. "Think I don't know how to break a neck to make it look like an accident?" Those words chilled me to the bone. I knew it wasn't a bluff. There was something in his eyes, a coldness when he said these things, that told me he had done evil before. Perhaps even worse things than I could imagine. So we lived, on a knife's edge, for almost a year of constant fear, of always looking over my shoulder, of sleeping with one eye open, a year watching my little sister wither like a flower without water, losing her childhood day by day, a year blaming myself for not being able to do more, for not finding a way out. Until the day came when everything changed, the day I realized it wasn't just Celeste and me against the world, that there were good people out there, people who could help us if I had enough courage to look for them. And it was this discovery that began to draw the path to our liberation. But I just want you to know that Even in the darkest moments, when it seems there's no way out, there's always a light, no matter how small. Sometimes that light comes from where we least expect it, and sometimes that light is ourselves, gathering courage we didn't even know we had. The second winter with Albert in our house was the coldest I remember, not because of the harsh wind that cut across the land, but because of the ice that had settled inside me. I wasn't the same Judy anymore. Each morning I woke up was a new battle. Each night I lay down was one more day I had managed to keep my little sister safe, even though it cost me the purple marks I hid beneath my long sleeves. During those months, I learned to sleep with one ear alert like a cat by the roadside. Any creak in the floorboards, any step in the direction of our room, and I was already sitting up in bed, ready to defend Celeste. Many nights he tried to enter, especially when he came back drunk from his trips. He'd find me awake, standing, holding the broom like a spear. "Just came to say goodnight to the little one," he would say with that whiskey breath you could smell from across the room. "She's already asleep," I would respond, not lowering my guard. "Good night to you too." He would look at me with anger, but also with a strange kind of respect, like someone who recognizes a worthy adversary. "One day you'll let your guard down, Judy. Then we'll see who's in charge here." In those moments, I would tremble inside, but kept a hard face. You can wait sitting down. Celeste wasn't the same either. That cheerful girl who sang all day had disappeared, leaving in her place a frightened child who spoke softly, who cowered when any man came near. At school, the teacher called Mom in to talk, concerned because Celeste no longer played with the other children at recess, just sat alone in a corner, always drawing the same thing, a black house with a sad girl inside. "It's because of her age," my mother explained, blind to what was right in front of her eyes. "Girls get like that when they're growing up, quieter." But Celeste was only 8 years old. What kind of growth was this that extinguished the light in a child's eyes overnight? That stole her laughter, her playful ways? Each time Mom said these things, I felt a revolt that almost couldn't fit in my chest. How could she not see? How could she not realize that this man who slept in her bed was destroying her own daughter? But soon I understood that sometimes people choose not to see. It's easier to believe the beautiful lie than the ugly truth. And Mom had already suffered so much, had worked so hard to raise us alone, that she clung with all her might to that chance of having someone to share the burden, even if that someone was a demon disguised as a person. One afternoon, when I was alone with Celeste helping her with homework at the kitchen table, I found the courage to ask, "Little one, does he still try to hurt you when I'm not around?" She lowered her head. The pencil stopped in the middle of a letter. She didn't answer with words, but the trembling of her little body told me everything. "You can tell me, Cel," I insisted with the softest voice I could manage. "I won't let him do anything to you." "He said it's our secret," she finally said, so quietly that I had to lean in to hear. "He said if I tell anyone, he'll send Mommy away like Daddy went away. He said he'll take me far away where you'll never find me." The blood boiled in my veins like hot coffee. "He's the one who's going to go away," I promised, holding her little hands between mine. "One day, he's the one who's going to disappear from our lives, and we'll be able to be happy again." "But Mommy likes him," Celeste replied, with a sadness no child should carry. "She'll be sad if he goes away." I was left speechless. How to explain to an 8-year-old girl that sometimes a mother's love isn't enough to protect, that sometimes the adults who should care are the ones who hurt the most? She was already confused enough, frightened enough. Her world had already been turned upside down. "Mommy would be even sadder if she knew someone was hurting you," I finally said. "She loves you more than anything in this life." That night, lying in bed next to Celeste, I made a decision. I couldn't wait any longer, couldn't let this continue. I had to tell Mom, even if she didn't believe me, even if she got angry with me. My little sister couldn't take much more of that suffering. I saw her withering a little each day, like a plant without sun. The next morning, when Albert left for another truck trip, thank God he was gone for 3-4 days in a row, I found Mom alone in the kitchen, preparing coffee before leaving for work. "Mom, I need to tell you something very serious," I began, feeling my heart beating so hard it seemed it would tear my chest. Talk quickly, girl. I'm already late, she replied, without taking her eyes off the lunchbox she was preparing. It's about Albert. He's doing wrong things to Celeste. She stopped what she was doing and looked at me for the first time. What kind of wrong things? I took a deep breath and told her everything. Everything I had seen, everything I suspected, everything Celeste had told me bit by bit. As I spoke, I saw my mother's face change. First disbelief, then shock. Finally a mixture of pain and fear that broke my heart. Are you sure about this, Judy? She asked when I finished, her voice trembling. It's a very serious accusation. I'm as sure as can be, Mom. I saw it with my own eyes. Celeste wouldn't make up something like this. She sat down in the kitchen chair as if her legs could no longer hold her weight. For a moment, I thought I had succeeded, that she had believed me, that now we were going to get rid of that man forever. My God, what am I going to do? She murmured, more to herself than to me. Do? You have to send him away. Report him to the police. She looked at me with eyes full of tears, but also with a fear I had never seen before. It's not that simple, Judy. You don't understand. What don't I understand? A man is abusing your daughter under your nose. What's there to understand? You don't know Albert like I do, she said, lowering her voice as if the walls could hear. He has a bad side when he drinks. He's threatened me more than once. It was like being slapped in the face. So she knew he was violent, knew he was dangerous, and yet she let him continue in our house near us. You knew he was like this and did nothing? I thought it was just with me, she confessed, her face red with shame. That you were safe. He only gets angry when he drinks too much, and I'm afraid, Judy. He said if I tried to end it, he would take revenge. That he knows dangerous people out there on the roads. At that moment, I felt a mixture of anger and pity for my mother. Anger because she had closed her eyes to the danger, pity because she too was a victim, also trapped in that web that Albert had woven around us. And now? Are you going to let him continue doing this to Celeste? She lowered her head, hiding her face in her hands. I'll talk to him. Ask him to stop. Ask? I almost shouted, incredulous. He won't stop because you asked. People like that don't stop. Lower your voice, she whispered, looking scared at the door as if he might enter at any moment, even though he was miles away at that moment. I'll resolve this, okay? Just give me time to think. I left that conversation feeling as if I had swallowed a stone. It hadn't been what I expected. Deep down, I believed that as soon as Mom knew, she would transform into that lioness that every mother has inside her, that she would expel Albert from our lives with tooth and nail. But fear had overcome the protective instinct. Fear and perhaps that strange dependence he had created in her. In the days that followed, I observed my mother closely. She was different, quieter, more nervous, always looking at the clock, counting the hours until Albert returned from his trip. She tried to stay closer to Celeste, came up with the idea of taking her to work one day, told her employer the babysitter hadn't shown up. But these were small, temporary measures. It wasn't the solution we needed. When Albert returned, 3 days later, I realized that Mom had spoken to him. Not because he had changed his behavior. On the contrary, he seemed more irritated, more aggressive. But because he looked at me differently now, with more anger, with more threat in his eyes. That same night, while I was washing the dinner dishes, he approached from behind me in the kitchen, so close I felt his breath on my neck. Your mother's been talking nonsense, he said quietly, just for me to hear. Said you've been making up stories about me. I didn't respond, keeping my eyes fixed on the plates I was scrubbing. You know what happens to girls who make up stories, Judy? Girls like that end up disappearing. They go for a walk and never come back. I felt an icy chill run up my spine, but I didn't show fear. I turned to him, facing those small, wicked eyes. I'm just fulfilling my obligation as the older sister, I replied with a calmness I didn't feel. Protecting those who can't protect themselves. He gave that ugly laugh, mocking. Your mother has already chosen her side, chose to believe me. You know why? Because without me, the three of you go back to misery. I'm the one who pays the bills here. I'm the one who puts food on the table. She knows that. I wanted to say I'd rather have the honest poverty of before than live with him, but I bit my tongue. There was no point in provoking him. I needed to be smarter than him. So you'd better stay in your place, he continued, pointing his finger in my face. Forget these stories you made up and stop putting bugs in your mother's head. Otherwise, it won't be just you who suffers. When he left the kitchen, my legs were shaking so much I had to hold on to the sink to keep from falling. It wasn't just an empty threat. I was sure he would do exactly what he was promising. People like that don't bluff. That night, lying with Celeste, who had finally managed to fall asleep after another day of frightened looks and silence, I understood that I couldn't count on Mom to get us out of this situation. Her fear was greater than her courage, and I couldn't blame her completely. I knew Albert was capable of terrible things, that his threats weren't just words, but I also knew we couldn't continue living like this, that sooner or later he would get what he wanted. He would catch Celeste at a moment when I wasn't around, would hurt her in a way that not all the love in the world could fix afterward. Or worse, he could do something to me, remove from his path the only obstacle between him and my little sister. It was that night, listening to Celeste's soft breathing beside me, that I decided, if Mom couldn't protect us, I would have to find a way myself. I would have to seek help outside the house, even if it meant exposing our shame, our fear, our situation to strangers. Because sometimes salvation comes from where we least expect it, and I was willing to knock on any door that might offer us a way out of that hell. The problem was that back then, these things were even more hidden than they are today. Nobody talked openly about abuse, about violence inside the home. It was as if a wall of silence protected the monsters, allowing them to continue their evil far from society's eyes. And we, the victims, carried alone the guilt and shame that, in fact, should have been theirs alone. But I was determined to break that silence, whatever the cost, because the price of continuing silent was too high. It was my sister's childhood, her safety, her future, and that was priceless. In the days that followed, I began to observe more attentively the people around me, looking for someone who could help us, someone who had enough authority to confront Albert, to protect us from his threats. Someone I could trust with our story that was so painful, so shameful. And it was thus, in this silent search for a lifeline, that I began to notice our neighbor from the house on the corner. Mr. James was a quiet, serious man who rarely conversed with the other residents of the neighborhood. He lived alone, always in a well-pressed uniform when he left for work. I only discovered later that he was a police officer. The first time I really talked to him was when I met him at the neighborhood store, buying groceries. I was in the checkout line, with Celeste holding my hand as always. He was in front of us, paying for a bag of coffee and bread. "Good morning, Mr. James," I greeted, gathering all the courage I had. "You're our neighbor, right? From the yellow house on the corner." He looked at me with those dark, serious eyes, nodding slightly. "That's right. And you're Mrs. Clara's daughter, if I'm not mistaken." "That's right. I'm Judy, and this is my sister, Celeste." He looked at Celeste with a different look than what I was used to seeing in men. There was no malice there, only kindness. "Pleased to officially meet you," he said, with a slight smile. "I always see you walking to school." When he turned to leave, I found the courage and said, "Mr. James, you work with the police, don't you?" He stopped, looking at me with more attention now. "I do." "Why?" "No reason," I replied quickly, feeling my face burn. "Just curious." He studied me for a moment, as if he could see through me, as if he sensed there was something more behind that seemingly innocent question. Then he nodded again. "If you need anything, just knock at my house. I'm always around when I'm not on duty." Those simple words lit a small flame of hope inside me. A police officer. Someone who could do something against Albert. Someone who had the duty to protect people like me and Celeste. Someone who, perhaps, would believe our story. But the courage I felt at that moment was soon suffocated by fear when we returned home and found Albert there earlier than we expected. He had returned surprisingly from his trip, cancelled at the last minute according to him. But the expression on his face when he saw us enter told me there was something more. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice controlled but his eyes sparking with anger. "At the store," I answered, showing the bag with the beans and sugar that Mom had asked us to buy. "Mrs. Clara asked us to go before she got home from work." He looked at Celeste, then at me, then at Celeste again. I saw you talking to that man from the corner. What were you talking about with him? My blood froze. Had he followed us? Was he spying on our steps? We just greeted him, I replied, trying to appear casual. He's our neighbor. I don't want you talking to strangers, he said, his voice rising a tone. Especially that one. He has the face of a meddler, of someone who thinks he's better than others. At that moment, I understood that Albert knew very well who Mr. James was. He knew he was a police officer and was afraid of him. And that gave me even more certainty that I was on the right track, that Mr. James could be our salvation. But it also showed me that I needed to be more careful, that Albert had his eye on us, watching every step, that the danger was even greater than I imagined. That night, when everyone was already asleep, I took out from under the mattress an old notebook where I had started to write down everything. Dates, times, what Albert did, what he said, the marks he left on me when I confronted him, the places where he touched Celeste when he thought no one was watching. It was my diary of evidence, my only weapon against him. One day, I whispered to myself as I wrote by the weak light of a candle, one day we'll be free again, and you'll pay for every tear you made my little sister shed. What I didn't know was that this day was closer than I imagined, that events were about to precipitate in a way that would change our lives forever, and that the courage I sought so much was already inside me, waiting only for the right moment to reveal itself in all its strength. The day when everything finally crumbled was on a Wednesday in March 1963. I remember it as if it were yesterday. The sky was heavy, the kind that announces a strong storm, the air so thick you could cut it with a knife. Mom had gotten a day off from work because her employer had traveled, so she was home, a rare thing to happen on a weekday. Albert was also home, between one trip and another. He was more nervous than usual, complaining about everything, drinking since early morning. He had received a letter saying he needed to appear at the police station because of an old fine, a small thing, but it made him furious. Now I understand that men like him are terrified of authority. They constantly break the law and fear being discovered. I was in the yard, hanging clothes on the line, when I heard the scream. A scream that froze my blood, that made my heart stop for a second. It was my mother's voice, a sound I had never heard come from her before. It wasn't anger, nor fear. It was pure horror. I dropped the laundry basket and ran into the house. What I saw in the living room was etched into my soul forever. Mom was standing at the bathroom door, hands covering her mouth, face white as candle wax. In front of her, Albert, with his pants halfway up, and my little sister huddled in the corner, crying without making a sound, her little clothes all disheveled. "What are you doing with my daughter?" Mom asked in a voice that didn't sound like her, thin, trembling. Albert adjusted his pants in a quick movement. "What nonsense is this, Clara? I was just helping the girl take a bath." "Celeste has known how to bathe herself since she was 5, Mom replied, taking a step forward. "She never needed help." I saw something pass over Albert's face, a flash of fear, perhaps, quickly replaced by that mask of anger we knew so well. "What are you calling me? What are you insinuating?" That's when I noticed that Celeste had run behind me, grabbing my legs, trembling like a leaf in the wind. That was the confirmation Mom needed, if she still had any doubt. "You monster!" she whispered, advancing another step. "Judy warned me. She told me. But I didn't want to believe it. How could I have been so blind?" What happened next was so fast, I barely had time to react. Albert charged at Mom like an enraged bull, grabbing her by the hair. "Who do you think you are to talk to me like that? Who do you think puts food on the table in this house? Who pays the bills? Let me go!" she screamed, trying to break free. "We'll see if you'll keep that sharp tongue after I'm done with you," he growled, dragging her toward the bedroom. I pulled Celeste into our room and locked the door. "Stay here," I ordered, my heart pounding in my chest. "Don't come out for anything." "But Mom," she whimpered, grabbing my arm. "I'm going to help her. You stay here, under the bed, and don't come out until I come back. Understand?" She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. I gently pushed her under the bed, covering her with the old blanket we used in winter. "Don't make a sound no matter what you hear." I left the room, locking the door from the outside and keeping the key in my dress pocket. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the first thing I saw, a heavy cast-iron skillet that had belonged to my grandmother. My mother's screams were coming from the bedroom, along with the sounds of blows and furniture being knocked over. "You're going to learn to respect me," I heard Albert yell. "You and those daughters of yours." At that moment, something happened inside me. The fear I always felt when he was around completely disappeared, replaced by an anger so great, so powerful, that it seemed to give me superhuman strength. I was no longer fearful Judy, the 16-year-old girl trying to protect her sister. I was a force of nature, ready to do whatever necessary. I entered the bedroom like a whirlwind. Albert was on top of my mother on the bed, his fist raised for another blow. She already had a bleeding nose, one eye beginning to swell. I didn't hesitate for even a second. I raised the skillet and hit him with all my strength on his back. He roared in pain and turned around, his eyes injected with fury. "You little witch, I'll end you." Before he could advance on me, Mom rose staggering and grabbed the lamp from the bedside table, hitting him on the head. The glass broke, making a cut that immediately began to bleed. "Run!" she shouted to me. "Take Celeste and run!" But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, watching Albert get up, touching his injured head, looking at the blood on his fingers. The expression on his face was pure hatred. He was no longer the man who controlled himself, who calculated his evil. He was a wounded animal, too dangerous. "You'll pay for this," he growled, picking up the belt that was thrown on the chair. "I'm going to teach you a lesson you'll never forget." That's when the front door burst open with a crash. My heart almost jumped out of my mouth when I saw who was there. Mr. James, our neighbor, the police officer. He was in full uniform, his hand on his gun holster. "What's going on here?" he asked, with a commanding voice, looking from my bloody mother to Albert with the belt in his hand, and then to me, still holding the skillet like a weapon. "None of your business," Albert replied, trying to regain his composure. "Family problem. You can go away." "I heard screams," Mr. James continued, entering the house more, his hand still near his gun. "Are you all right, Mrs. Clara?" My mother took a step forward, her injured face but a new determination in her gaze. "No, Mr. James, I'm not. This man, he hit me, and he did something worse. To my little girl." The word "worse" hung in the air like a dark cloud. I saw Mr. James's expression harden, his eyes narrow. "That's a lie!" Albert shouted, taking a threatening step toward my mother. "She attacked me first. Look what she did to my head." That's when I found my voice again. "It's not a lie, Mr. James," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "He's been doing this for months, hitting us and touching my sister in wrong ways. I have everything written down. Dates, times, what he did. It's all in my notebook." Albert looked at me with so much hatred I thought he might jump at my throat right there. "You lying little devil!" "Stay where you are," ordered Mr. James, now with his hand firmly on his gun. He turned to me. "Where is your sister now?" "Locked in the bedroom. She's safe." "Good," he said, turning back to Albert. "Sir, you'll have to come with me to the station. We have some questions to ask." "I'm not going anywhere," Albert replied, taking a step back. "I didn't do anything wrong." "It's all made up by these two. That's what we'll find out at the station," Mr. James said, his voice calm but firm. "You can come willingly or unwillingly. The choice is yours." I saw in Albert's eyes that he was calculating his chances, thinking if he could win a fight against Mr. James, if he could escape, if there was a way out of this situation. But I also saw the exact moment when he realized he was cornered. "I'm calling a lawyer," he finally said, throwing the belt on the floor. "You'll see. I'll sue everyone for defamation." While Mr. James was handcuffing Albert, I went to open the door for Celeste. She was exactly where I'd left her, huddled under the bed, hugging her rag doll. "It's over, little one," I said, extending my arms to her. "He's not going to hurt you anymore. Never again." She came out slowly, looking at me with those eyes that had seen things no child should see. "Is it really true, Judy? He won't come back?" "It's true. Mr. James, our neighbor, is a police officer. He's taking him to jail right now." We hugged tightly, me finally feeling the tears come, after months of holding back crying to be strong for her. They were tears of relief, of exhaustion, of a pain that was finally finding a way out. When we returned to the living room, Mr. James had already taken Albert away. Mom was sitting on the sofa, her face in her hands, sobbing like a child. I sat beside her, still with Celeste in my arms. "Forgive me," she cried, looking at us both with a desperation that broke my heart. "I should have believed you from the beginning, Judy. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you." "You're a victim of his too," I replied, holding her trembling hand. "He deceived you, like he deceived everyone. Men like that are experts at deceiving." She shook her head, inconsolable. "A mother should know, should feel when something is wrong. But I was so tired, so alone. I thought he was the answer to our difficulties." "It's over now," I said, hugging her and Celeste together. "We'll start over, just the three of us." That night, we all slept in the same bed, holding each other like when we were little and Dad was still alive. But I knew the nightmare wasn't completely over yet. There would be statements to give, difficult questions to answer, wounds to heal. My diary ended up being an important piece in the investigations. When the police searched Albert's things, they discovered he had been arrested before in another town for assault. He had a criminal record that he hid from everyone. It wasn't his first time hurting a family that trusted him. Mr. James became a guardian angel for us. He accompanied us to the police station, explained the process, especially protected Celeste from the most invasive questions. It was his idea to present my diary as evidence. "Your word against his might not be enough," he explained. "But with this detailed record and the physical marks, we have a strong case." The days that followed were the hardest of our lives. The neighbors whispered when we passed, some with pity, others with that silent judgment that hurts more than a slap in the face. "Why did you let it get to this point?" their looks asked my mother. "How didn't you notice sooner?" But slowly, very slowly, we began to rebuild our lives. Mom got more hours of work with her employer, who learned about the situation and, to our surprise, was very understanding. I found a part-time job at a neighborhood bakery to help with expenses. And Celeste went back to school, to the same teacher who had noticed something was wrong. Healing the soul is a slow process, much slower than healing bodily injuries. The purple marks Albert left on my mother disappeared in a matter of weeks. But the marks he left on Celeste, on me, on our family, those took years to soften. Some, I believe, never completely disappeared. Celeste had nightmares almost every night that first year. She would wake up screaming, in cold sweats, her little eyes wide with terror. I would sit on her bed, stroke her hair, sing the same lullabies our mother sang when we were little. Gradually, the nightmares became less frequent, the nights more peaceful. 6 months after Albert's arrest came the trial. It was the first time I saw him since that terrible day. He was different, thinner, older, his look less arrogant. But when he saw us enter the courtroom, I saw that same hatred flash for an instant in his eyes. Testifying wasn't easy. I had to tell, in front of strangers, things I could barely admit to myself. I had to describe what I had seen him do to Celeste, the threats he made, how he manipulated my mother. Each word was like tearing off a piece of my skin. But I looked at Mr. James, sitting in the front row, nodding to encourage me, and found strength to continue. Thank God, Celeste was spared from testifying. The judge agreed that she would speak only to him in private, without Albert's presence or the lawyers. When she came out of that room, she seemed lighter, as if she had left inside a bit of the weight she carried. Albert was sentenced to 8 years in prison for child abuse and domestic violence. At the time, it seemed too little time for such evil he had done. Today I know there is no sentence long enough to compensate for a child's stolen childhood, destroyed trust, years of fear. When we left the courthouse that day, Mom, Celeste, and I, holding hands, I felt for the first time in a long time that we were truly free. That we could breathe without fear, sleep without terror, live without constantly looking over our shoulder. "Thank you for being so brave," Mom told me that night when we were alone in the kitchen, after Celeste had already gone to sleep. "Thank you for doing what I couldn't do." "You were brave too," I replied, holding her work-calloused hands. "In the end, You faced him, even afraid. That's courage too. She shook her head, her eyes teary. I shouldn't have let it get to that point. A good mother. Enough blaming yourself, I interrupted. The only one to blame is him. Only him. You did the best you could under the circumstances. Now we have to look forward. And that's what we did. We looked forward, day after day, month after month. Our small family of 3 women reconnected, strengthened, found moments of joy again amid the healing. It wasn't an easy or quick path, but we took each step together, holding each other's hands. Celeste started to smile again, to sing softly while playing. Mom stopped jumping, startled, when someone knocked on the door, stopped cringing when a man spoke loudly near her. And I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Years later, when we were already adults, Celeste told me something I never forgot. You were my hero, Judy. When I thought no one could save me, you saved me. But the truth is that we all saved ourselves together. Me, gathering courage to speak up. Mom, finally facing the painful truth. Celeste, surviving with a strength no one would expect from such a small child. And Mr. James, appearing at the right time, believing in us when we needed it most. That terrible experience taught me that evil does exist, and sometimes lives under our own roof. But it also taught me that there is goodness, that there are people willing to help, to believe, to extend a hand when we need it most. And it taught me, above all, that we are much stronger than we imagine, especially when we fight not only for ourselves, but for those we love. The path to true healing was just beginning. We needed not only to get rid of Albert, but also to piece together our broken souls, rebuild our confidence, and find a way to move forward without letting the fear and pain of the past define who we were. And so, step by step, we began to collect evidence not just against Albert, but evidence of our own strength and resilience. The morning after Albert's trial dawned differently. The sun came through the window cracks as if bringing not only light, but also hope. I breathed deeply that air that seemed lighter, without the weight of his presence in the house. But I knew our battle wasn't completely over yet. I sat at the kitchen table with my little notebook of evidence, flipping through those pages that had helped send Albert to jail. Each note there was a painful piece of our history, but also a brick in the construction of our liberation. Mr. James had taught me a valuable lesson. Document everything. Don't rely just on word against word. We need concrete evidence, he had told me as we prepared the case. Your word has value, but the system often doesn't believe victims without clear evidence. That's why, even after the trial, I continued the habit of writing everything down. Celeste's nightmares, the nights when Mom cried in secret, the small victories of each day, like my sister's first genuine smile when she received a kitten as a gift from Mr. James, or the day when Mom finally managed to sleep an entire night without startling. Documenting our recovery became as important as documenting the abuse had been. It was my way of ensuring we were truly moving forward, that Albert's shadow diminished a little each day. Soon after the trial, Mr. James introduced us to Mrs. Olivia, a lady in her 60s who volunteered at a support center for women victims of violence. It was a simple place, operating in the back of a church, but the work they did there was more precious than gold. You need help to heal from what happened, Mrs. Olivia explained with that gentle voice that felt like a hug. There's no shame in asking for help. The shame is all his, the abuser's, never yours. At first, Mom resisted. I don't need to keep talking about these things, she would say, her wounded pride still trying to protect her from the pain. What's past is past. But Mrs. Olivia was patient, like someone who had seen many women in that same situation. What isn't spoken about doesn't heal, Mrs. Clara. It stays stored inside us, like a thorn buried in the flesh, infecting everything around it. Gradually, Mom gave in. She started attending the meetings on Wednesday nights, while I stayed home with Celeste. She always returned with red eyes from crying, but also with a different sparkle in them, as if each tear carried away a little bit of the poison Albert had left. For Celeste, Mrs. Olivia recommended a psychologist who treated children victims of abuse. Dr. Martha was a young woman, with round glasses and a gentle smile, who had a special way of getting my baby sister to open up. "I don't have to talk, right, Judy?" Celeste asked me, frightened before her first appointment. "I don't want to remember those things." "You don't have to say anything you don't want to, little one," I replied, fixing the ribbon in her hair. "Dr. Martha just wants to help you not have so many nightmares. It'll be like playing." And in fact, at first it was more like playing than a consultation. Dr. Martha used dolls, drawings, stories to help Celeste express what she couldn't with words. Gradually, I saw my sister begin to release that heavy burden she carried on her small shoulders. In one of the sessions when I went to pick her up, Dr. Martha called me to talk privately. "Judy, you should also do therapy," she suggested kindly. "You've been through a lot for a girl your age. You took care of your sister, confronted that man, held things together when your mother couldn't. That leaves marks, too." I shook my head, stubborn. "I'm fine. It wasn't me who suffered what Celeste suffered." She smiled with understanding. "There's a type of trauma that comes from witnessing the suffering of those we love and not being able to prevent it. From carrying responsibilities that shouldn't have been yours. You deserve care too, Judy." Those words struck a chord with me, but at the time, I didn't accept the suggestion. I thought I needed to be strong for everyone, that I didn't have the right to weaken now that we were finally safe. It was Mr. James who ended up convincing me, months later. "You know, Judy," he said one afternoon when he had stopped by the house to bring a cake made by his wife, "true strength isn't never needing help. It's knowing when to ask for it." That same day, I scheduled my first appointment. It was like opening a floodgate I had held back for so long. I talked for hours, cried like I had never allowed myself to cry before. I talked about the guilt I felt for not noticing the signs earlier, for not being able to completely protect my baby sister, about the hatred I still felt for Albert. "Hatred is normal," Dr. Martha assured me. "It's part of the process, but it can't be your fuel forever, or it will end up consuming you from within." And so, little by little, all of us were forging our paths to healing. Different paths, at the pace of each one, but moving in the same direction. Forward, always forward. The judicial process continued even after the initial conviction. Albert appealed the sentence as expected. We had to revisit that nightmare a few more times, reaffirm our testimonies, face the dirty tactics of his lawyer who tried to discredit us. "It's common in cases like this," explained Mr. James. "They try to attack the credibility of the victims, insinuate they made everything up out of revenge or to gain some advantage." It was at the second appeal hearing that we discovered something that changed everything. A woman approached us as we left the courthouse. Brunette, in her early 30s, with a girl of about 10 years old at her side. I recognized in that child's eyes the same fear I had seen so many times in Celeste's eyes. "Are you the family who reported Albert?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mom nodded, wary. "We are. Why?" "My name is Regina," she introduced herself. "Albert was my husband before you. We ran away from him 5 years ago when I realized what he was doing to my daughter." I looked at the girl beside her and felt a tightness in my chest. Another victim. Another child whose dreams had been stolen by that monster. "Why didn't you report him?" I asked, unable to hide my indignation. Regina's eyes filled with tears. "I tried. I went to the police station, but they didn't have enough evidence. Nobody believed me. He was respected in town, had influential friends. It was easier to run away, change our names, start over far away." "How did you know about the trial?" Mom asked. "I saw his photo in the newspaper," Regina explained. "I almost fainted when I recognized him. After all these years, I came because I want to testify. I want him to pay for everything he did, so he doesn't hurt anyone else." When we told Mr. James about Regina, he was excited. "This changes everything," he explained. "A pattern of behavior proves it wasn't an isolated incident. It makes it much harder for his defense to claim you're making it up." With Regina and her daughter's testimony, Albert's appeal was denied. More than that, his sentence was increased to 12 years. When we left the courthouse that day, the air seemed lighter, the future brighter. Regina became a close friend in the years that followed. Our broken families found strength in each other. Our daughters, hers by blood, ours by heart, created a special bond, as only those who have gone through the same kind of pain can create. It was because of Regina's story that I began to realize we weren't alone, that there were many families suffering in silence, many children being hurt by those who should protect them, many women trapped in abusive relationships without knowing how to escape. In 1965, 2 years after Albert's imprisonment, Mrs. Olivia invited me to help at the support center. I had just turned 18, was finishing high school at night, and working during the day at a downtown store. "You have a gift, Judy," she told me. "Women trust you. They feel you truly understand what they're going through." I started as a volunteer on Saturdays, just a few hours. Soon I was there whenever I could, listening to heartbreaking stories, holding trembling hands, teaching what I had learned the hardest way. The importance of documenting everything, of seeking help, of building a support network. Write everything down, I would tell each woman who arrived with marks of aggression. Dates, times, what he said, what he did. Keep it in a safe place. One day this might be your salvation. At the same time, I continued collecting evidence of our own recovery. No longer of Albert's aggressions, but of the small and large signs that we were healing. The day Celeste slept a whole night without nightmares. The first time Mom accepted a colleague's invitation to go out for coffee. The morning when I realized I had gone 24 hours without thinking about Albert. The best revenge is living well, Mrs. Olivia used to say. And we were determined to live in the best possible way. In 1967, 4 years after Albert had been imprisoned, something happened that I never imagined possible. Mr. James, who had become a great friend of the family, began to show a special interest in my mother. He was no longer just the helpful neighbor or the police officer who helped us. He was a gentleman, in his mid-40s, widowed for many years, who looked at my mother with affection and respect. "Do you think your mother would accept having dinner with me on Saturday?" he asked me one day, seeming more nervous than a boy inviting a girl to dance. "Are you asking my permission to date my mother?" I asked, surprised. He scratched the back of his neck, embarrassed. "I guess I am. I know what you've been through. I know how difficult it was. The last thing I want is to complicate things further or bring back bad memories." I smiled, touched by his consideration. "You're the most different person from Albert that exists in this world. I think Mom would be happy to have dinner with you." The romance between them was slow, respectful, built on a foundation of friendship and mutual trust. Mr. James understood my mother's fears, her hesitations, her moments of withdrawal. He never pressured, never demanded more than she was ready to give. To my surprise, it was Celeste who most supported the relationship from the beginning. "Mr. James makes Mom smile," she told me one night, as we were tidying up the kitchen after dinner. "It's been a long time since I've seen her smile like that," and it was true. Mom looked years younger when she was with him. The worry lines that had deepened on her face in recent years softened a bit. Her eyes sparkled in a way I barely remembered. In 1969, 6 years after Albert's imprisonment, Mom and Mr. James married in a simple ceremony in our house's backyard. I, at 22, and Celeste, at 14, were the bridesmaids. Mrs. Olivia, Dr. Martha, Regina, and her daughter were there, along with other friends we had made in this new phase of life. I never thought I would be able to trust a man again. Mom confided in me on the eve of the wedding as we tried on the simple but beautiful dress she would wear. I thought that part of my life was over forever. "Mr. James isn't just any man," I replied, adjusting the belt of the dress. "He showed with actions, not words, that he deserves your trust." She nodded, her eyes watery. "And you too? Are you really okay with this? I don't want you to feel I'm replacing your father or—" "Dad would want you to be happy," I interrupted gently. "And Mr. James makes you happy. That's all that matters to us." On the wedding day, when I saw my mother walking down the improvised aisle between the chairs in the backyard with that radiant smile that illuminated everything around, I knew we had finally reached the other side of that dark valley. Not that the scars had disappeared. They were still there, forever a part of who we were, but they no longer defined us, no longer limited our ability to feel joy, to trust, to love. Mr. James became not only a good husband to my mother, but a loving stepfather to Celeste and a mentor to me. It was he who encouraged me to continue my studies, to take the normal course, and become a teacher. It was he who showed, with his daily example, that there are good men in this world, men who care instead of hurt, who protect instead of threaten. That same year, 1969, I received news that shook our newly stabilized world. Albert was requesting parole for good behavior. He had served only 6 of his 12-year sentence and was already trying to get out. The fear returned like a punch to the stomach. I immediately thought of Celeste, now a teenager beginning to blossom, finally leaving behind the ghosts of childhood. I thought of my mother, newly married, building a new life with Mr. James. I thought of myself, almost a trained teacher, with plans and dreams for the future. He won't succeed, Mr. James assured us when we told him the news. I'll mobilize all the contacts I have. This type of criminal rarely truly recovers. Once again, we return to collecting evidence, now no longer of past abuses, but of the lasting impact they had had on our lives. The years of therapy Celeste still needed, the psychologist's reports documenting the persistent trauma, the nights when she still woke up screaming when something triggered the bad memories. Regina also joined our fight, bringing her own documentation, her own story of suffering at the hands of that same man. The parole hearing was in September of that year. It was the first time I saw Albert since the trial, 6 years earlier. He was older, thinner, but his eyes, those eyes still had the same hidden evil that I knew so well. When our gazes crossed in the hearing room, I felt a chill run down my spine. For a brief moment, I was again that 16-year-old girl, terrified, but determined to protect her baby sister at any cost. But then I took a deep breath and remembered who I was now. A strong, educated woman with a support network, with tools I didn't have before. I testified with a calmness that surprised even myself. I spoke about the lasting effects of the abuse, about how our family still struggled with the consequences of his actions, about how Celeste, now 14, still needed regular therapy to deal with the trauma. When Regina testified, telling how her daughter had developed problems with self-esteem, trust, relationships with others, I saw the faces of the parole board members change. The narrative of Albert as a man who made an isolated mistake and deserved a second chance began to crumble. The parole request was denied. Albert would have to serve at least 3 more years before he could apply again. When we left the hearing room that day, I felt as if we had won a crucial battle in a war that seemed endless. "We can't let our guard down," said Mr. James as we drove home. "He'll try again as soon as he can." And he was right. But we were also more prepared now. Each parole denial strengthened our case, created a more solid record that Albert was a danger to society, especially to women and children. It was during this time that I began to realize the greater importance of what we were doing. It wasn't just about us, about our family, about our personal justice. It was about all the potential future victims we were protecting by keeping him behind bars. It was about breaking the cycle of violence before it could repeat with another family. Our work of collecting evidence, which had begun with my little notebook hidden under the mattress, had transformed into something much larger, a testimony to the power of victims when they unite, when they document, when they persist, despite fear, despite shame, despite a system that often seems to work against them. And so we continued, year after year, hearing after hearing, building not only the defense against Albert, but also a future where the shadows of the past, though never forgotten, no longer had power to paralyze us or determine our paths. Because in the end, the most important evidence we collected wasn't in the documents, the testimonies, or the medical reports. It was in the life we managed to rebuild despite everything, in the strength we found in the shadows, in the light we managed to kindle, even in the darkest moments of our journey. When Albert finally served his full sentence and was released in 1975, I was already another woman. At 28, I had graduated as a teacher, taught at our neighborhood's municipal school, and continued my work at the Support Center for Women Victims of Violence. Celeste, at 20, was studying nursing and had become a beautiful young woman, still with those green eyes that resembled bright emeralds, but now with a sparkle of determination that filled my chest with pride. When we received the news of his release, of course we felt fear. It's a fear that never completely goes away, like a scar that aches when the weather changes. But now we had tools we didn't have before. We had a protection network. We had Mr. James, whom by this time we affectionately called Dad, vigilant as always. "He can't come near you," Mr. James reminded us, showing the restraining order he had obtained. "If he tries any contact, he goes straight back to jail." One of the conditions of Albert's freedom was that he couldn't remain in our city. He had to move at least 300 miles away, report regularly to a probation officer, and couldn't work in places with access to children. Small guarantees that, even not completely eliminating our fear, allowed us to breathe. We never saw him in person again. We learned, through Mr. James's network of contacts, that he had moved to Colorado, where he got work as a mechanic's helper. Years later, we received news that he had died in a car accident, drunk, alone, on a deserted road. I didn't feel joy at the news, nor sadness, just a strange sensation of a cycle that was finally closing. But this story isn't about Albert. It's about how we rebuilt our lives despite him, beyond him, after him. My mother's marriage to Mr. James was like a second chance for all of us. He showed us, with infinite patience, that not all men are monsters in disguise. He taught us that true love doesn't hurt, doesn't humiliate, doesn't terrorize. On the contrary, it strengthens, respects, protects. Celeste was the one who flourished most with this new family structure. Gradually, she stopped being that frightened girl who cowered when a man raised his voice. She began to trust, to open up, to laugh in that carefree way she had before everything happened. "You know, Judy," she told me one day, as we returned together from college, me already graduated, her still a student. "Sometimes I wonder how our life would have been if Albert had never appeared." "It would have been easier," I replied, thinking of the invisible scars we still carried. "Maybe," she agreed. "But we also wouldn't have met Mr. James or Mrs. Olivia or Dr. Martha. We wouldn't be helping other women. It's strange to think that something so terrible can lead to good things too." Her wisdom, still so young, surprised me. And she was right. From the darkness we lived through, purposes, vocations, friendships had been born that might never have formed under other circumstances. I continued to work at the support center, now no longer as an occasional volunteer, but as a coordinator. Alongside my teaching career, I built a welcoming and guidance work that became a reference in the region. I taught women not only how to leave abusive relationships, but also how to rebuild their lives afterward, as we had done. "You have a special gift, Judy," Mrs. Olivia always told me. "When you speak, they really listen, because they know you've been where they are now." Celeste, in turn, specialized in pediatric nursing, working specifically with children victims of abuse. Her own painful experience transformed into a unique sensitivity to detect signs that other professionals often didn't notice. "There are things a child doesn't say with words," she would explain to younger colleagues. "They say it with silence, with their look, with the way they cower when someone raises a hand." Mom and Mr. James grew old together, building a marriage based on mutual respect and companionship. When he retired from the police, they set up a small ranch on the outskirts of the city, where they raised chickens, grew an abundant vegetable garden, and joyfully received the many borrowed grandchildren, the children of the families we helped at the center. In 1980, I met Anthony, a history teacher who was transferred to our school. A gentle, patient man who understood my fears and hesitations without my needing to explain much. Our romance was slow, respectful, built on a solid foundation of friendship and mutual trust. "You deserve to be happy, Judy," Mom told me when I brought Anthony to meet her. "Don't let that man's ghost steal anything more from you." I married at 33, later than was common at that time. I didn't have biological children. A conscious choice, not out of fear, but because I already felt like a mother to so many children who passed through the center. Anthony, with his natural kindness, understood and shared this feeling. "Family is who we care for, who we love," he would say. "They don't have to be of the same blood to be ours." Celeste married 2 years later, to a doctor she met at the hospital where she worked. She had 2 children, a boy and a girl who grew up hearing Aunt Judy tell stories, not the horror stories of our past, but stories of overcoming, of courage, of new beginnings. Over the years, we kept in touch with Regina and her daughter. We saw the girl grow up, become a strong young woman, get married, have her own children. A shared victory over the evil that once tried to destroy us. In 1995, when I was nearing retirement as a teacher, I helped found a shelter for women and children in situations of domestic violence. A safe place where they could stay while rebuilding their lives away from their abusers. We called it Clara's House, in honor of my mother, who had passed away that same year, peacefully at 75, holding Mr. James's hand until her last breath. The opening of the house was a bittersweet celebration, sad for Mom's absence, but also a tribute to everything she represented. The ability to start over, to find strength even in the most desperate situations, to transform pain into purpose. Today at 78, I look back and see that our story, as painful as it was, served a greater purpose. That little notebook where I began to write down Albert's cruelties transformed into hundreds of testimonies, reports, records that helped save other families, other children, other women. We are not just survivors. We are bearers of precious knowledge, of wisdom acquired in life's trenches. And sharing this wisdom, this path to liberation, became the meaning of my existence. If you're watching me now, perhaps you're living your own nightmare. Perhaps you have an Albert in your life, using another name, another face, but causing the same kind of terror, humiliation, pain. I want you to know there is a way out. There is help, there is life, a good, full, dignified life beyond this dark moment. Document everything. Seek help. Don't be ashamed. The shame belongs to the one who abuses, never to the one who suffers the abuse. Trust that there are good people in this world willing to extend a hand, as Mr. James extended his to us when we needed it most. If this account touched your heart in any way, please leave your like and subscribe to my granddaughter Rose's channel, Grandparents' Tales, who is helping me share these stories. Each subscription is like a hug that reaches me and gives me strength to continue. The time I have left in this life I want to use to show that scars, no matter how deep, can transform into marks of honor, witnesses to our incredible capacity to survive, to start over, to flourish even in the most arid soils. As we say here in Arizona, after the harshest frost comes the most beautiful green on the field. And so is life. After the deepest pain, if we have the courage to keep walking, can come the most genuine joy, the truest peace, the freedom that no one will ever be able to take from us.